Hey guys, welcome to the Whimsical Workshop. In this video, I'm going to share with you how to make the Down the Garden Path pattern. This is our newest pattern featuring the Make Today Beautiful fabric line from QT Fabrics. So let's get started. So let's take a look at the quilt we're making today. Our Down the Garden Path quilt features a star block and a panel block. And I'm going to show you how to do both. When we do our panels, we always like to do a cheater border around the panel to make sure we can trim it away. But we're going to start with the star block first. So here is the star block all put together. And what it's built with is using a square and a square block in the four corners, and then two triangle and a square blocks sewn together to create that diamond, and those go in the middle with a solid center. So first up, let's talk about how to do square and a square. So this is a square to square block, and this quilt is made up of four of them, and they all have a green corner and a purple corner and then two white corners. And the purple corners go in, and the green corners go out, and then there's two white corners on either side that become the background. So to make a square and a square block, we're going to use flip and sew on the corners, and I'm going to show you a trick so these always come out accurate. So what you'll need is one large square, two white smaller squares, one purple, and one green smaller square. Now the math on a square and a square block to make it look like this is the smaller squares are half the dimension of the larger square. So here's a 6.5, these are 3.5. So if you were to want to design your own square and a square block, what you'll need is one large square and four small squares. So the traditional method for square and a square is you would take a ruler, and on your small square you would draw a line from corner to corner. Okay, so by doing this, you're only going to use this point and this point to figure out how accurate that line is. And that gives you a lot of play, and your blocks, when you go to sew these on, you would put it on here, you would sew on that drawn line, and you'd flip this open. And if you've done this before, you'll know that it doesn't always come out accurate. It's usually a little bit off, and that's because there is some play when you draw the line that way. So how we're going to draw the lines is we're going to use a folded corner clipper. This is the folded corner clipper XL. There is also a smaller one that is like 6 inches or 5 inches. I like the bigger one because you can go all the way up to 10-inch squares. And you're going to lay this ruler on your square. And now I'm able to align the top edge of the square with the top edge of the fabric, the side of the square with the side of the fabric, the bottom of the square with the measurement on the ruler. There's also a line over here we can align, and we can use this diagonal here to here to align this. This is giving us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of reference, and then we can draw our line. Okay, that is going to be much more accurate for sewing. Now, this is the traditional method. This is the method we just did. This goes from point to point, and you sew on this line. If you're going to use the ruler method, you are going to still sew from point to point, but your 1/4 inch foot goes on this line, because you can see it's not from point to point, it's a 1/4 inch away from your point. And that is going to let you use your 1/4 inch guide right on there. So these guys are already marked. I'm going to go ahead and mark this one to match. And these are Frixion pens that I'm using. These are on our website. I'll link them below. Ironing it will make it disappear, but so will any kind of friction. So right now I'm just erasing it. I love to use these pens in the office as well. I use them at my desk to write all my notes and keep things in my journal because they erase, and I can get rid of them if I need to make changes. Okay, so we've gotten rid of that line, so I'm going to go ahead and mark this correctly. So now they're all marked correctly. Now you'll notice we have a small triangle and a big triangle. When you go to place this on your square, you are going to place the small triangle always pointing out. Then I would take this to my sewing machine and sew from corner to corner, but using this as my 1/4 inch guide. So that is right here. I've already done it. Let's flip this guy open. And I'm going to draw the line in there so you can see where the line would be if I hadn't already ironed this. Okay, so let me hold this up here so you can see it really clearly. There's my sewing line, and there's my 1/4 inch line that I would have drawn beforehand. Again, this pen erases with ironing, so when I ironed this open, I lost my line, and I just redrew it for you. So there it is, that's sewn. Then when you flip this up, you can see, you can't see the fabric behind it. That means it's sewn correctly. There is no leftovers. Like if you've sewn this a different way, the other way, you might see something like that. But doing it this method, it comes out accurate. So now you have to decide, do you want to cut both layers away or just this middle layer? So, and this is an example, I've cut both layers away. So there's nothing behind there. Or you could cut just your middle layer, leaving a 1/4 inch seam, so that works great because you can use that drawn line as your guide. And then when you flip this out, you have 2 layers, but that means if this was off, you could use this back square as a guide when you're piecing your blocks together. If it flips open and it looks right, I usually get rid of it, but what you do want to do is be consistent. You either want to do this throughout your quilt or this throughout your quilt. You don't want to do a mix. So now that we've got one sewn on, we went ahead over here and we sewed the second one on the same way. Then we sewed the 2 background ones on. And these just will flip open as well. And that will give us our finished unit. So we are going to be making, you'll need to make 1 of each of these for each block. And there are 13 of these blocks in the quilt. So you're going to make those. So to do a triangle and a square, that is what this guy looks like. We're going to make some with white in the background white, and some with the purple. To do these, you would use the templates in the ruler, or you could use a 2 peaks in 1 ruler, which looks like this. And I'll put a link for this below. You may have a ruler called a Tri-Rex ruler. That also works. That's just a 2-part ruler where this is all together in one piece. I tend to like this one because it has a little extra trimming on it that makes it really nice to line things up. Or you could create something out of these templates. Just make sure if you buy a digital download pattern that you print this to actual size and not fit to page, so that these templates are the right size. And I'm pretty sure this one I did fit to page. And it's like, when you lay the 1-inch square ruler on there, it is almost exact, but it's not exact. So you need to make sure that this on your printer settings says actual size and not fit to page, and double check your 1-inch box right here to make sure it is exactly 1 inch. All right, with all that done, so I've gone ahead, I've cut my templates. So there's my center. This is where we're headed. And these are either side, just like that. So what you're going to do is you're going to follow the directions on your ruler, if you have one of these, on how to trim all the points again, or if you have the templates, they do not have the trim points like the ruler. So you align the white piece on top of the blue, and with the ruler you can align this end and this end and the side edge, and it makes it a little bit easier. Otherwise you have like a little dog ear sticking out and you have to kind of guess where the dog ear is. So there is that one, and so we went ahead and sewed that on. Press it towards the background. Oh, I didn't mention that on the others. And these guys, press them out. All 4 of them. Don't go to the dark, go out. So it looks like that on the back. Okay. So we press that one out. Then we're going to go ahead and align the second piece. We're going to sew a 1/4 inch. It looks like that. And then we will press this one out. Now we have our white ones, and then you would do the same thing for the purple. And then you just put these 2 pieces together, and you can sew your 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you wanted to, I don't tend to like the look, but this would be an option, is you could press these towards the purple, towards the blue, and then when you put these on top of each other, they would nest. But then what will happen is half of your diamond is recessed and half of your diamond is raised. So I like to do them both so they're pressed out. And then when I sew these two together, I press that seam open. Okay, so instead of pressing it to one side, which it's not a ton of bulk, but I do think it lays nicer and flatter when you press it open. So that is where we're gonna go with the triangles in a square. So there's all of those steps. Now that we have all our pieces together, you would have 4 of these for your quilt block and 1 of these. And let's bring the block back over. So there's our center. You would have 4 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have your square and a squares. And again, make sure the green is pointing out. Whoops. That the green is pointing out and the purple points in. And there we go. I didn't have enough fabric to do the other 3, so we're just going to imagine that there. But I do want to talk about how I press these once you start sewing them. So the first thing you would do is you would sew the top and bottom row like this. Would be a fat square, skinny square. It would be a fat square, a rectangle, and a fat square. And then let's flip this guy over so you can see how we pressed that. Okay, so here it is. So this is the top row, and I pressed these out. Then you do 2 skinny ones with the center, and I press those in. Then I do another skinny one with the 2 fat, and I press those out. That way they all nested when I sewed them together. Then when I sewed the rows together, I press that seam open. That just makes it less bulk at these points, and everything lays nice and flat, and you want to make sure you don't have bulky seams. It makes it harder to quilt. So that is how you make the star block of our Down the Garden Path quilt. You will make 13 of these, I believe. So next up is the complementary block, which looks like this. And when you go to sew these 2 blocks together, because it has the same flip and sew in the corners, it creates this diamond that, again, when I show you the final quilt, you'll see the diamond that just floats in the middle of each block. So to do this block, the first thing you need to do is cut your panel squares at 9.5 inches. Then you're gonna sew the first border on. This first border, we call it a floating border, and we always make it wider so that if this panel were to come in smaller, you would be able to adjust this border as needed. Hopefully there'd be enough slush in here, depending on how small these would come in, that it wouldn't throw off the whole quilt. We can't control how big or small these panels come in. We're given a measurement when we design the quilts, but then even if they rerun the fabric, sometimes it comes in a different size. So we created these borders as our insurance. So the first thing you want to do is sew your first border on, and then you are going to fold this in half and then into quarters. And this is going to give me my center lines in both directions. And then I happen to have a 12.5 inch ruler. That is what this needs to be trimmed to. So I can take the 6 1/4 mark and align it on each of those creases. And then trim this block up to measure 12.5 inches. So there is the first one. And you can see we're taking about 1/2 inch off of this. So if that panel came in at 9 inches instead of 9.5, you do have a little bit of slush. You just probably wouldn't have to trim. It would just be the size it is. All right, so there it is. So this is the block trimmed, and this is the block before we trimmed it. It's not a lot, but it's enough to guarantee that your quilt will go together successfully. And if you bought any of our panel patterns, you'll know that we do this on all of our panels. Okay, so then once you do that, you will, let's go back to our finished block. You will go ahead and sew on the purple border and the white border. And then you will repeat what we did on the square and a square, and you will do flip and sew in the corners, okay, in the 4 corners. Now on this, because this is pieced back here, I don't tend to trim that part away. I tend to just trim the background of the square away, because if I screw something up and I cut that away, I gotta do all the borders over. So it's kind of just like a little added insurance. So even though my square and a square is over here, I consistently cut both layers. As long as I'm consistent with these blocks and leave the layers, we'll be fine. So that is how you make the panel block. And then once you have the 2 blocks, again, you put them together. You're gonna sew these. Now, I would probably press these seams open in between the blocks and the rows, because you'll have a lot of bulk at these points. But if you have to press one way or the other, I would press towards the panel block. You have less seams. Like here, you'd have a seam bulky seam there, 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 and there. Where this one, you just have it here and here. So, and then like I said, once you sew these together, they're going to alternate and you'll get this floating diamond in the middle. So this one says, I think I'll just be happy today. This one says, do more of what makes your soul happy. And there's quite a few of the sayings. I only got 3 of them here. And you make the world a better place. So these are the 3 panels they sent me. They did send me all this yardage ahead of time. This fabric will be hitting stores in fall of 2022. So they only gave me a small sampling of them. And I had enough to do these blocks to share with you, to show you a little tutorial on how to do it. Again, the pattern is called Down the Garden Path. The fabric collection is Make Today Beautiful from QT Fabrics. And I hope you've enjoyed learning how to do square and a square and triangle and a square, and some tips on how to put the whole quilt together. So let me know in the comments below what you thought of this video, and if you enjoyed learning these techniques. And I would ask, if you learned anything in the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a thumbs up. And as always, I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.